welcome back. I'm going to read another chapter from my book, The Powerful You. And before I get into that, I just want to say thank you so much for following along, for listening. It means a lot to me because I wrote this book for all of you to hopefully inspire something that gives you a little bit of hope in yourself and in your ability to go out into the world and accomplish and achieve what you are desiring to do. And so that way you connect and align yourself with who you truly are, so that way you can fulfill the very purpose that you are here on earth to fulfill. Okay, so this chapter is called The Genuineness of a Person Revealing Themselves. Emotional intelligence is a chance for every individual to foster the ability to communicate their emotions freely and honestly with one another and with themselves. This is one of the most underdeveloped aspects of our social society, and yet it's the most important one in creating a new generation of empaths who lead the world into a collaborative and harmonious place. This has been one of the most essential studies in my entire life. There is so much maturation that stems from learning this field. Empowerment and unity will begin as we move past the point of one-word texts, silent conversations of nothing to say and don't know what to say, avoidance of people and ourselves when experiencing unexpected and dismissed emotions, and finding the space for rectitude and emotional articulation between parties that both speak and listen. In all of my life, there is nothing braver or more attractive than a person who communicates so openly with intention to connect, increase and deepen intimacy, and share vulnerability. The genuineness of a person revealing themselves, their feelings, and their thoughts takes tremendous courage, and not only shows that this person has reflected on who they are, but is also making the effort to unite that with others. Pain is good. It is our pain that sends messages to us about ourselves. It teaches and acts as a road towards opportunity. It awakens within us truths and guides us towards our purpose, sculpting our passions and potential to give back. This philosophy of letting go does not exist, or in other ways is misunderstood. That is a dangerous mentality of limitation that feigns the ability to erase memories and tricks us into believing we can escape them. Emotional memories are exactly what their names suggest. They are memories of emotions felt that are neurologically associated with experiences and people. Much like typical memories of experiences or descriptions, reflecting on that emotional memory is in no way an indication of weakness or lack of growth. The brain is a powerful mechanism, and recalling things from the history books of our life is not a matter of being held back. It's only natural that everything we've ever been through will always carry on with us. That is the point of the brain, after all, to remember things, to learn from things. It creates pathways and bridges to references, associations, and notes it has made about everything and everyone, so that we can go back whenever we want or need to, for whatever reason, for knowledge, for pleasure, analysis, to assess threat levels. Sorry, I'm reading my scribbled notes. For inspiration, to feel something, or to remember a specific feeling. These memories mentor our instincts, guiding and protecting us through the predatory fields of life. Reflecting on them, reliving them, recalling them, or whatever else you do with them is not in itself bad. In fact, that is quite normal and healthy. But let's take a look at how it can become unhealthy and an unhealthy abuse of ability. As is the case with anything, there are ways to abuse this resource, such as consistently bringing back into our present consciousness the dark or painful emotions within our emotional memories, and not having much reason to do so, or knowing we have already recalled them for analysis before. Doing what will have an effect on what we think, what we do, how we react, and how we talk for the rest of that day, and that is the concerning aspect to it. Oh, I read that incorrectly. Hold on one second. My TV is going crazy. Okay. Let me reread that sentence. So, as is the case with anything, there are ways to abuse this resource, such as consistently bringing back into our present consciousness the dark or painful emotions within our emotional memories, and not having much reason to do so, or knowing we have already recalled them for analysis before. Doing that will have an effect on what we think, what we do, how we react, and how we talk for the rest of that day, and that is the concerning aspect to it. Even still, it's not the end of the world, but it will give your mind some trouble finding relief and peace. Doing this daily is the abusive part, because you are intentionally, if even on a subconscious level, hurting yourself, and consistent intentional hurt is not healthy for personal growth. However, these emotions themselves are not a negative or self-destructive thing. They are just emotions. Usually, the abusers happen to be the people who live their days with those fortune cookie mentalities of letting go and don't live in the past. It's easy to be overcome and overwhelmed by your own emotional landscapes when the mentalities you foster are built on the fear of those emotions and being present in the reality of your truth. These individuals tend to be afraid to reread chapters of their book, to relive a memory, even if from a subjective place, to experience emotions that have since passed, for the purpose of learning from them, scared they'll awaken something they avoided or tried to hide from, a truth they don't want to face about themselves or about that time. They are blind to the value of that pain, to that reflection, and to the wisdom that comes with it. They miss out on the lessons that reside in these places. These are people that deny the full spectrum of emotion, seeing things in positive and negative, good and bad, right and wrong, which is basically a cognitive distortion of black and white thinking. These are fearful people who live with strict rules and limits on their own maturity and evolution, yet relate this to strength and courage when in fact it's quite the opposite. There is no such thing as letting go, and those that follow that philosophy only hinder themselves and the others they influence with that damaging mentality from true transcendence. Emotions bring us to mindfulness, making us aware of how we feel, how we think, how we move, what we want, where we're going. The opposite is living in a state of unconsciousness, like we do when we're on our phones all day, or on our phones or laptops with our friends around us, running to our computers to form relationships, relying on external things to hold our attention or divert it when we run out of ideas or things to say to connect. Unconsciousness is fear. Fear of vulnerability and fear of expression. Speak up. Reveal yourself. Communicate. Go to people and not away from them. The externals of life, such as our technologies, games, gadgets, etc., all operate to reprogram us away from our necessary natural connections to other humans and humanity. Before I go on further, this is something I will adjust in this chapter. Coming from abuse myself, the whole revealing yourself, I've been learning in my recovery that it's okay to have some guards, in terms of like privacy, while you are assessing and feeling out each new person that you meet. Because unfortunately, we do live in a society that is very nuanced, which is fortunate and also unfortunate, because it means that some people that we're trying to get to learn and know and hope that they get to learn and know us may actually be predatory or have malevolent intentions, such as narcissistic people or sociopaths or psychopaths, who have bad intentions to manipulate us or abuse us or deceive us. So with that said, that's something I'm gonna adjust that line, because I think we should reveal ourselves within our own comfort level. Because people like myself and maybe like you who have been hurt by have come from narcissistic abuse, for instance, we know all too well what it's like to be an empath, have no emotional boundaries, and to open up with love in our hearts and full trust that people are just genuinely going to be authentic and kind and honest, when in reality that's kind of not always the case. So do not just reveal yourself, is what I'm saying, especially if you come from abuse or trauma like that. Take your time, make sure you feel comfortable and safe and you have enough trust built and established with these new people that you're meeting before you do let them into more personal truths about yourself. So anyway, back to the chapter. When we care for someone else's existence, we grow away from the shame of vulnerability, from the normalcy of writing vague social media statuses about emotions that we aren't comfortable forthrightly expressing. We grow into actual listeners, instead of people who always assume that emotional revelation is attention seeking. We begin to hear each other, to really open our ears, to care for what is being shared with us, to talk back and forth without inhibitions, to come towards each other when in pain rather than hiding or running away or putting on masks of dismissal. Intimate connections start to form, and suddenly, "How are you?" isn't just a phrase thrown out with no regards for an answer. It's a true question coming from a person who genuinely cares for that answer, who cares for that conversation. It's emotional investment, and it's medicine for a world that is afraid of empathy and honesty. So, a lot of these chapters that I've been reading to you might somewhat change, because I have been in, this is me being a little bit honest with all of you. I've been in therapy for the past, I want to say maybe 2 or 3 years, and I have been healing from narcissistic family abuse as the scapegoat, as well as many, many other abuses and traumas. And it's been intense. It's been intense. But my recovery journey so far has led me to new revelations that make me realize some of the things I wrote in this book I don't agree with anymore. Because I actually wrote this before my therapy. So there's some things that have changed. And I'm sure, and I'm just saying this, like, I'm sure that even when I do publish this, maybe a year from publishing this, a couple months or 3 years from publishing that, there might be things in that I won't agree with anymore, because naturally, as people grow and learn and assess themselves and assess the world and their experiences, they learn new things. So I too will be learning new things, and it will be adjusting my perception and my perspective about the world, about people, about things, about myself. And that is not flip-flopping. Flip-flopping is a totally different thing. When people are flip-flopping, it's usually because they don't actually know what they think to begin with. And usually a lot of people who flip-flop, for the most part, I believe, are doing so because they're just trying to be liked. So they're flip-flopping between whatever is the status quo or whatever is the most socially acceptable thing. That is not what growth is. Growth is self-assessment and coming to new understandings about yourself, about other people in the world, that may adjust things that you previously believed or thought to be true or understood about yourself or the world. Like in my therapy, unpacking the abuse and trauma I went through, that was catastrophically what is the word? Cathartic. It was catastrophically cathartic. It was an epiphany that was so life-changing for me, because for so long in my life, in my history, I knew that something was wrong, and I never quite could put a name to it or really pinpoint it exactly, because I didn't have the knowledge back then about what I was going through and what things really were. A lot of the abuse and the trauma that I suffered was considered normal, which is not healthy at all. But when you're involved in those kind of systems and then you go out in the world affected by those systems, then you just keep gravitating towards more people who are just like your abusers or your traumatic incidents. And unfortunately, I gravitated towards a lot of unhealthy situations and people. I've made a lot of mistakes myself due to my lack of knowledge about what was going on, what I was going through, and having bad role models basically of how to communicate or socialize, or how to be respectful, or how to take care of myself. So that's a video for another time to talk about that kind of stuff. And I still have to question if I'm comfortable with that, because keeping some privacy is really important to my health. I don't need the opinions of the public in my business that they have no real actual firsthand knowledge about, because they're not me and they didn't live through my stuff, so they're only hearing words. Um, so so with that said, with this chapter, the biggest thing about this chapter for me was I know I understand that there is this concept in our society, especially with men for the most part, excuse me, where there's this belief that crying, having an emotional moment, caring about something that it brings up emotion inside, even intense emotion, such as need or attachment, vulnerability, such as fear, jealousy, envy, uh, insecurity. These are things that a lot of us, both men and women, can sometimes feel a lot of shame for. And I know that growing up, I grew up around a lot of men, a lot of straight men specifically, um, real alphas I grew up around, and my dad was an alpha. So I grew up around that sentiment that if you show any of that or admit to any of that, you are weak. You are sensitive. You are, yeah, I guess for the most part, weak. You're looked down upon as not strong, physically or even mentally. And what I've learned is that when I have been at my weakest, it has been because I have suppressed my emotions, not expressed them. Anytime I have actually expressed any of the things I just said, insecurity, vulnerability, heartbreak, attachment, need, anything that really exposes your true vulnerability, where someone can take advantage of you or weaponize things against you, which is basically why vulnerability is so scary. It's so revealing. And we're so open to the perceptions, misperceptions, misassessments of you and your character. I think I even read something recently that statistically most women feel turned off when their boyfriend or male partner cries. And that just goes to prove too that we're all part of that problem. If we're looking at our men and saying you need to express yourself because the mass suicide rate is high for a reason, because you're suppressing emotion. But then at the same time, we're also playing a role in contributing to the message, or at least the covert message, that doing so is unattractive, it's a turn off. It's conflicting, and I know that I've experienced that confliction in myself because of both men and women, and that's been very difficult to work through. But in my recovery, I realized, like, reflecting back, that anytime I've been at my weakest, it's been when I suppressed my emotions. And anytime I've felt very strong, very confident, very capable, has been when I've worked through my emotions and expressed them. And I know that might sound counterproductive, in the sense that, you're being very vulnerable. How are you strong? Well, how you're strong from it is, I take this with a grain of salt. This is just my experience, but in working through my emotions, I learned more about myself. I learned more about what is important to me and what's not. I learned more about what I have been suppressing. I've gotten more in touch with my shadow and accepting these darker parts about myself, and being more collaborative with them and allowing them to express themselves more without the judgment for them. All of this has allowed me to understand that I am so capable to experience my emotion, work through it, and come out of it even more in alignment with who I actually am. You are going to be your strongest mentally, emotionally, physically, when you are being authentic. That's just the truth. And any male, or any woman, for example, that is out there not being authentic, how can you know what you're capable of? How can you know what you have to contribute to the world if you are still out of touch with yourself in some regards? So I know that there's a lot of men, especially in the whole, like, alpha sphere, that really think that you're weak when you cry and admit insecurities and vulnerabilities. And I understand why, looking at statistics like the one I mentioned. And since I don't really date women, I can't really speak for the straight male struggle in terms of, like, wanting to release that emotion, maybe, but also fearing that their girlfriends or their wives are going to suddenly think of them totally differently for expressing that moving forward. Because I've experienced that in relationships too myself, where I felt very vulnerable after expressing pain or insecurity, and watching as my partner sort of did kind of look at me differently, look at me less alpha, less capable of protecting them. And that can feel very emasculating, especially when you understand that this has nothing to do with my manliness. My masculinity has nothing to do with my emotional expression. It really doesn't. Emotional expression is just that. It's human. And expressing your emotions and working through them is how you start to figure out who you are, what's going on, working through things, and coming into alignment with your true self, which is your authentic self. But we do tend to box these things. And there's nothing wrong with boxing necessarily, because that's how the brain works. The brain is, from what I've understood about the brain, it's a mechanism that it needs to categorize things. So it needs to put things in boxes to understand things more quickly. It's constantly assessing everything. New people, new environments, and in order to make sense of the threat level of all of this stuff, it has to do a quick snap judgment. It does. So there's not necessarily anything wrong with that. It's only wrong when we hold to that, even as we get new information. So anyway, I'm getting off onto so many tangents because I love intellectualizing. I love philosophizing. I love talking about ideas and a plethora of different topics. I love conversation. I love debating stuff, and so I get really into excogitating and pushing my mind to new limits of consideration and thought and perspective, and all for the pursuit of what the truth may be, and understanding for myself, how do I actually feel? I know that this person feels this way, and that's wonderful that they know that about themselves, but how do I feel? How do I think about this thing? What information, what knowledge do I have? What resources, what research have I done? Do I have all the information, as much as I can, from all different sides to gather and then reflect on and think about what makes more sense to me? So, all in all, revealing yourself, of course, when you feel safe with someone, is a really powerful thing. It can be a really powerful thing because when you are safe with someone that really is worthy of your trust, really is respecting you and treating you with dignity and treating you well and not manipulating you or deceiving you or hurting you or betraying anything, like that, those are the people that we should probably work a little bit more towards connecting with, because those are good people. And no, those are so hard to find in this world. Take it from me. And you probably have experienced this stuff yourself, so you might know too that it's very rare to find those people. I found many people in my life that I thought were like that, and it turns out they were kind of just like a lot of the unhealthy people that used to be in my life before. You know? So reflect on your connective abilities. And if you're a man or a woman, reflect on your emotional health and your emotional well being. Let go of, well, not let go, because I literally just talked about how that's not really a possible thing necessarily. But learn to compartmentalize and put aside the old understandings or concepts of attaching femininity and masculinity to emotional expression, because that's just human. It really, really is. It is healthy for both to explore that and express that, because we want everybody to aim to come into alignment with themselves, because that's the only way that you are going to master, to an extent, your own healing, and thus learning what gifts and talents you have to contribute to the well-being of the world. And that is what, if all of us can get to that point, then we may be more open to good connection, healthy connection with other people. But right now, in this world full of rising narcissism, it's so important that we heal. A lot of our egos are very bruised and very hurt, and we need to heal that and get beyond our egos, so that way we can be actually available to people, so we can actually build communities that are strengthened and strong in just our human relatableness. That's one of my theories. I have a million thousand different theories on everything, so that may change too in terms of my belief. But that's something that I really think. I think that our world may not be fully, totally ready for genuine community, because we are so hurt inside ourselves, and we're struggling to understand ourselves and heal ourselves and work through things that prevent us from actual connection. There is a rise of people who don't like other people and don't want to be around other people, so wanting to connect has been suffering year by year as well. And it's going to be hard to connect with people if you don't really know who you are. So we might have to know ourselves first before we are available to know other people and connect with them in healthy ways, which will then lead to the third process, which is genuine community. Community that is not built on narratives, community that is built on the connectedness of people who are in authentic alignment with who they are, and expressing that, the securely attached, the emotionally regulated and mature parts of ourselves. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I look forward to sharing some more.